Thank you. I represent the Crimean Human Rights Group, and we have been working in Crimea since 2014, and also represent expert network of Crimean platform. Crimean platform, international Crimean platform, was established in 2021. It's initiative of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and now it's only international platform for de-occupation and reintegration Crimea. So originally I am from Crimea, and I was human rights defender and lecturer in local university in Crimea before occupation. But in 2014 I was forced to leave my home in Crimea because Russia opened criminal case against me and my colleagues because I was human rights defender, and I was one of coordinators and organizers of Euromaidan movement in my hometown in Yalta. So I started new life in Kyiv. But last year, Russia tried to attack my home again in Kyiv region. So, but we are strong with support of our partners, and we continue to fight against Russia, against this anti-democratic regime, anti-democratic actions. And so I think very bright example of our fighting for women, not only like human rights defenders. It's my son. My son was born last year under Russian missile attack on Kyiv. So I think it's one of example how Ukrainian women continue to fight against Russia. So about Crimea and about persecution of women after the Crimea occupation in 2014, Russia began preparing a full-scale invasion. As you know, all the Crimean practices of persecution, enforced disappearances, deportation of children, forced passportization, forced mobilization, prohibition of freedom of speech, and destroyed of Ukrainian identity are now being used in newly occupied territories after 24th of February, but on a new scale and with increased brutality, including the killing of thousands of civilians, among them women and children. And also Ukrainian citizens are being persecuted in occupied Crimea for their political views, opposition to the occupation or to the war, or religion affiliation. And my colleague from Crimea, Lutfiye, will tell more about it. I would like to focus on persecution, women persecution in newly occupied territories. After the occupation of few territories like Kherson or Zaporizhia regions, it's southern part of Ukraine. The Russian authorities applied the Crimean practice there. Before the invasion, Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, called FSB, had prepared list of journalists and activists in these regions. And for example, I saw a similar list in Crimea in 2014 because I was on this list in 2014. And the same practice I saw in newly occupied territories. Based on this list, the Russian military searched for activists, journalists, including women, came to their homes and abducted them in the newly occupied territories after 20 February 2022. For example, in March last year, the Russian military broke into Katerina Gandzuk's apartment in occupied Kherson and robbed and smashed the apartment. And Katerina was a well-known anti-corruption activist in Ukraine, and she was killed in an attack ordered by local authorities in 2018. But the Russian military came to her apartment anyway, and it was a very strong message for local activists that Russian military and Russian FSB will persecute all local activists in newly occupied territories. So among the abducted women are volunteers, journalists, and participants of the protests against the occupation, for example, like in Kherson. And a separate category of women includes women who are wives of Ukrainian military or security service officers. These women were abducted, tortured, and some of them were raped by Russian military or Russian FSB officers because the Russians demanded information from these women about their military husbands. Some women, like activists or volunteers, were taken to occupied Crimea after their abduction, and we work with several freedom detention places in Crimea and try to collect evidence and information about these women and other people who now are in occupied Crimea. For example, Irina Hoробtsova, Ukrainian resident of Kherson, she worked in one of the leading IT companies in Ukraine. And after full-scale invasion in Kherson, she volunteered in Kherson, and in social networks she posted publication to support Ukraine against occupation, against Russia. And in May last year she was abducted by Russian military in her house, and later the Russian Federal Security Service confirmed the parents that Irina now in custody in Crimea. Some women are detained during filtration at Crimean checkpoints. These checkpoints controlled by Russian side. It's like between occupied Crimea and Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. And for example, this is how a Ukrainian woman tried to get through Crimea to an occupied village in southern part of Ukraine, because her small son lives there with his relatives. So she was going to her son, but she was detained during the filtration. And Russia has not officially confirmed to her parents where she is. According to our information, now she is also in custody in one of pretrial detention centers in Crimea, in Simferopol city. And the number of these illegal detention places in occupied territories is constantly increasing, including Crimea, and the number of civilians transferred to the Russian Federation is growing too. And for example, in new pretrial detention center number 2 was opened last year in Crimea in summer and controlled by Russian FSB. And this year also, and one new detention center number 8 also was opened in Crimea. And with the start of full-scale invasion, tens of thousands of citizens have become civilian hostages, including women, and are kept in unlawful and freedom places in occupied territories or in the Russian Federation. And you know, of course, about some process between Ukraine and Russian Federation, but this process is about military. So the current exchange process between Ukraine and Russian Federation are only for prisoners of war, for military. Well, in case of civilians, there are no effective mechanism for their release and return to Ukraine-controlled territories. And for example, we have case so-called women's exchange in October last year. Then Ukraine returned 108 women from Russian captivity, and 96 of them were prisoners of war, military women, and only 12 were civilians. But these are single cases, and Russia is currently refused not only include civilians and civilian women to exchanges, but also refused to confirm their detention, for example, in Russia or in occupied territories. So, in the end, I think very important to say what we see, what we need in this situation. And like human rights defenders, we see it's necessary to support establishing an efficient international mechanism to identify civilian hostages, release them, and return to Ukrainian-controlled territories. Also very important include in this mechanism data verification and international monitoring of places of unfreedom. And one more, to provide and continue to provide assistance to the government of Ukraine in the investigation of war crimes, crimes against humanitarian laws, human rights violations in the occupied Crimea. So this can help us to release civilians and back them to Ukraine. And thank you for organizing this very important event, and we are grateful for Spain's support of Ukraine. It's really very important for us. Thank you.